everybody, welcome. This is the 10th Horseations Mixology course, and thank you very much for joining. You could have chosen any other place to find this information on, but you chose to join me to spend the next half hour, so I am very grateful and I appreciate it. And let's just go ahead and get started. This program is just a free mixology course that I host once a month, just to share my knowledge and my love for mixology with everyone. And a cocktail or two will be mixed. So disclaimer, I have never been a bartender. I have just a lot of knowledge from mixology from my own research and going to different bars. I have bar back briefly before COVID, and then bars got shut down, of course, and I don't need to go into that story, but let's just go ahead and get started with the Gin and Tonic. So International Gin and Tonic Day is coming up on October 19th. So hope you guys have the time to celebrate this simple yet very tasty cocktail. So first off, I'm just gonna go ahead and share my desktop so that you are able to see my countertop. Feel free at any time during this session, you can interrupt me if you have any questions or comments about the cocktail. So the Gin and Tonic, it's a very, very simple cocktail. It is just gin and tonic water with optional lime if you so prefer. However, I'm gonna go a little twist on this based on what Dave Arnold, very famous mixologist, and he takes science into account when mixing drinks. He actually serves it in a champagne glass, not a standard rocks glass. Now, why do you ask? Well, tonic water is carbonated, and carbonation, there's a reason why champagne flutes are so tall and straight with a small opening. It traps more of the carbon dioxide, the bubbles inside the drink itself, and it's a slow loss of carbon dioxide versus if it's a wider glass, if you can imagine in a rocks glass, there'll be much quicker escape, and then that tonic water will not be as carbonated as it was initially. And so with that, that's why Dave Arnold chooses to use a champagne flute. So we're gonna go ahead and use that. Now the gin I'm gonna be using is Empress 1908 gin from Canada. This gets the beautiful color from butterfly pea flowers. Go ahead and mix, put in 1.5 ounces of this just straight into the glass. And so this has butterfly pea flowers, has a lot of like earthy notes to it. So if you like your gin like so, just like similar to Plymouth gin, in a sense, you can go ahead and try that out. Otherwise, a gin and tonic with your standard beef eater or your Bombay Sapphire tastes just as lovely. And so all we're gonna do is just add tonic water. Simple, right? But don't forget, because there's only 2 ingredients in this cocktail, just like the old-fashioned, quality of the ingredients do matter because it makes or breaks the cocktail. We're gonna be using Q Mixer's Spectacular Tonic Water. So you can go ahead and use Fever Tree as well. But I like Q Tonics. This is a company created by somebody in New York, and you just top it up with around 3 ounces of tonic water. Now, what's beautiful about Butterfly PT is that you can actually amaze some guests if you do choose to use Empress gin or infuse your own gin with butterfly pea flowers. The pH levels changes because the Butterfly PT, it's an indigo blue, but once you add some sort of acidity to it or tonic water, it'll change to a pink hue, as you can see. And so that's pretty much it, a gin and tonic. Now you could finish it off by topping it up with a splash of lime juice. However, in this case, I don't prefer it because I like to let that Q Tonic quality tonic water shine through in the drink. But you can garnish it with a lime wedge, just like so. And that's pretty much your gin and tonic. Super simple, super easy cocktail to make. However, the quality of the ingredients do matter. So if you look at tonic water sometimes, you do see a lot of added sugar, a lot of added preservatives. So you want to avoid brands such as those. So Q Mixers, can't go wrong with it. Same as Fever Tree, really can't go wrong with it. So another thing about using a champagne flute for the gin and tonic instead of your standard rocks glass, those carbon dioxide bubbles, it really like brings out all the flavors of the gin, and it is that evanescence. It really comes up. And then when you put your nose to it, you really could smell those aromas. And that's what makes it more amazing in a champagne flute. It's also fancier. Don't you drink with a pinky up, instead of holding a rocks glass. Personal preference, but that's what Dave Arnold did, and that's what I'm gonna do. And so that's pretty much it for the gin and tonic. So before we get into our second cocktail, I like to go into a little history of gin and to really introduce you what's the history and the flavor, pun intended, behind this spirit. So how did gin begin? So a lot of people say gin, I don't really like that because you're probably tasting those juniper berries inside the gin. That's what makes gin gin. So when it started, it's actually considered kind of flavored vodka because you're taking a distilled spirit, infusing it with all these random botanicals that you can so choose. That's really what the definition of gin is. But gin is a whole category in itself because there's so many botanicals out there that you can use for your gin, different flavors that you can mix and match. And so how it began was actually, it started with Genever. So I'm gonna show off a bottle here. This is Bols Genever. This started in the 16th century in Holland. So this is from Amsterdam, the Bols distillery. So if somebody asked, what's the difference between different tonic waters? The non-fever tree ones that just don't taste the same. So as mentioned before, if you use something like Schweppes, for example, or you use something that has a lot of added sugars, you can actually take a look at the ingredients in Q mixers. Here I'm reading off, there's nothing added beside total sugars is only 9 grams. Now, if you compare that, their Q mixers, their sugars come from cane sugar. So it's actually like natural versus like additional sweeteners and stuff that you get when you buy something like Schweppes, or I'm trying to think of another brand here, but that's the only one that really comes to my mind right now. Canada Dry is another one. If you take a look at the ingredients, there's actually a lot of added sugar. And then there's also, don't forget that notorious corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup. That's not really and also that stuff is what gives you like massive hangovers the next morning. So if you stick to really quality or really just the drinks that do use actually quality ingredients and actually focus on the taste of the quinine, which is what makes tonic water, that's what sticks out and has Fever-Tree and Q mixers stick out from the other brands. Now, I'm pretty sure there's other brands out there that are up and coming. However, I'm not too familiar with them, and I just stick to Q mixers because they've never done me wrong in their grapefruit soda, their ginger beer, and their tonic water in this case. So I hope that answered your question. So I'm gonna go ahead and continue about the Genever in Holland. So it started off with Genever, which is what is created through malt. And now if you think of malt, that's Scotch whiskey, right? But basically they just took it, distilled it, and then they got that malty sweetness of Bols or Genever in that sense. And so that's what they termed as Dutch courage back in the day, because Holland was allied with the British forces back then for war. And so the British had a hand on the Genever and Genever. Thank you for, my pronunciation is not the best, but Genever, yes. Thank you very much for correcting me there. But Genever is malt, pretty much, comes from malt. And then this Dutch courage is what got the soldiers that confidence to fight through the wars. Now, the British got their hands on it and they loved it so much. They really wanted to replicate that taste. However, they could not. No matter what they could not replicate that taste. And so what they had to do was they actually added some sugar into the Genever and to try to replicate that, but it just wasn't the same. And this became a whole nother category of gin itself. I don't have a bottle, but this is what is termed as Old Tom gin. So you probably get Old Tom from Tomcat. That goes into a little later. I'm going to talk about the gin craze and bathtub gin, because in 18th century London, a lot of high taxes from imported spirits such as brandy, because at the time the French and British, they were not really good friends, imposing high import taxes on brandy and grapes. And so with that, a lot of local people just did not want to pay. Of course, no one likes taxes, right? And so because of that, they created their own gin. Gin was cheap to make, and it sparked the gin craze. And because it was so easy to make, people started doing these weird contraptions in their bathtubs. And that's what was termed as bathtub gin back in the day, because people literally would distill it in their bathtub. Now, lawmakers were trying to put strict regulations on this and trying to figure out like how to, how to mediate this. It's pretty disgusting if you think about it. You're getting gin from someone's bathtub, but people just wanted gin so badly, and the people that could not distill it themselves, they just would buy whatever they could. And so that's what an example of this would be like. There would be signs outside posted with a tomcat, which is basically a black cat, and the paw. All the person had to do, the patron, would come by, ring a bell, or drop a coin into a slot, and then the bartender inside would discreetly pour their shot of gin from their bathtub gin into a metal tubing, and then the receiver, the customer on this end, would just take a cup and they will fill it up, and that they got their ration of gin for the day. Now, that's perfect social distancing, of course. However, that's a lot of lead poisoning, I'm telling you. And actually the gin craze, like a lot of people died during that time. There was a lot of casualties due to gin, a lot of poisoning and stuff, because this stuff wasn't good, right? It's not good for the body. But that's not to say there's all illegal gin existing in London or England at the time. Actually, Plymouth gin, very famous even now, they're in their own category of gin. Plymouth gin right here. In 1793, the town of Plymouth, England, the Fox and Williamson distillery began producing this special kind of gin with a more natural sweetness compared to Old Tom and Genever at the time. And they added their own specific blend of roots with the juniper. And so with that, it became the official gin of the Royal Navy. And that's hence why you do see a British Royal Navy ship on the label of Plymouth gin. And you can actually buy this Navy strength, because Navy strength, short and simple to describe it, it's 57% ABV. This is just the perfect percentage that they found that you can still light the gunfire, and then it's also not too diluted to drink. So because if you wanted to dilute it, just add water. That's it. Add water in your line. And so this is also created using a pot still. Now, if you remember my third class, I did go over pot still versus a column still with Irish whiskey. Now, pot still has heavier flavors because everything is concentrated in that one single pot. Now, the problem with the pot still is that it takes a long time. If you're imagining somebody had to go in, you gotta dig everything out, clean everything out, and then you got the next batch in to distill again. Now that takes a while, and so there's a slowdown on production, and so not everybody really liked that, or distillers, I said, didn't like that. And with the higher demand, of course, you want quicker speed, right? And so with that during that time, I mentioned before that the Cafe still, I cannot really pronounce his name. I could never pronounce his name, but Anis Cafe, he invented the Cafe still, which basically made for rapid distillation, because it was a really tall still that had multiple openings, and then the distillers would go ahead and put the mash into different sections based on when it was finished or when it was used up, and then they would just clean it out while it was still distilling. And so this continuous still also enabled for botanicals to be a little bit more like lighter, citrusy, and very aromatic notes, which is where you get your dry London gin. So this Beefeater is a perfect example of London dry gin. You got London all over the bottle, but this Beefeater is great in a gin and tonic. It's also great in any gin drink that you can think of. Bombay Sapphire is another one. There's plenty of London dry gins out there. You just go ahead and pick your favorite. And so with that, the London dry gin came to be much more crisper, much more lighter notes, and just more botanicals compared to Genever, compared to Old Tom Gin and Plymouth Gin. And because of that, it exploded in the 19th century and also became a lot more popular due to the cocktail. You're probably thinking of it already in your head, the martini. The martini exploded in popularity during the 19th century. I'm not going to get into it because I did already go over the martini in detail in the 4th class. You can go ahead and check it out on YouTube if you would like. But gin, there's just so much out there, so many options. But the main thing about gin is that it does have to include the juniper berry. because they added it, the people from Holland added the juniper berries in the very beginning, in the very start in Genever, because that's what made gin, and it actually made the gin a lot more palpable to the people back in the day. Now, a lot of people currently are turned off from the taste, the initial burn of the gin because of the juniper berries, but there are a different category of gin now, which is new age gin. If I have a bottle right here, actually, I can show you. Hendrick's gin is a perfect example of what would be categorized as new age gin nowadays, because they take away, there's still juniper in there because you have to have juniper to be considered gin, but their main botanicals now are rose petals and cucumbers, for example. And so with that, you get Hendrick's. So they try to stray away from the typical London dry gins with the heavy juniper notes to try to appeal to a newer audience to introduce them to gin. Another one is aviation gin. You might have heard of this from Mr. Ryan Reynolds. This is focused on sarsaparilla root. And so this one's a lot spicier and a lot, like, it hits you harder than Hendrick's gin, but some people like it. And so this is a different type of gin, you would say. And so there's a lot out there to explore, the different botanicals that you use, so much variety of botanicals. Like, you're thinking flower petals, how many flowers are out there, right? You're thinking dried fruit, so much fruit out there, right? What do you use? Herbs, tea leaves, seeds, the list goes on and on and on and on, and there's different combination of them. You can read on gin bottles like, like 31 botanicals. What are they, right? What combination? How many are used? Not to mention too, when are they added to the distillation, right? You can add it into the mash itself and distill it along with the mash, but you can also hang a basket on top when it's distilling. The vapors are going up and it just catches the light notes. That's pretty much it. The vapors just pass through it. Or you can even have your gin ready and then you just macerate it. You just throw in like tea leaves, just put a bag, you just put it in there, just macerate it for like maybe 5 minutes or so and take it out. The duration, there's so much variety. And so that's why gin, the category, there's so much to it, but that's why you see so many bottles. It might be intimidating. It's intimidating for me as well, but go ahead and just explore. There's so many flavors to explore. Just look at, pinpoint which category you would like, and I would say go from there. So again, the 5 categories: Genever, started from Holland, is a starter from malt wine and juniper infused distillate. And actually, a fun fact about Genever, the only way you can be actually legally be called Genever, you have to be distilled in Holland, Belgium, and maybe some areas of Germany. But that's for in terms of legal naming purposes. Now, Old Tom Gin, I actually do not have a bottle, but it's actually England's attempt to replicate the Genever, but added sugar instead right now, or they added sugar to it. Right now, there's no current rules governing what determines what is Old Tom Gin, but that's the definition on how it was created. Then there's London Dry Gin. Juniper berries are the main component, and you cannot add, the law says you cannot add more than 0.1 grams of sugar per liter. So that means you are getting the full taste of distillate and the botanicals used. Then, of course, there's the Plymouth Gin. It must be distilled and bottled in Plymouth, England. I mean, that's pretty much just Plymouth Gin. There's nothing really to it. And then there's, of course, the new age gin that's straying away from juniper as the main botanical. And so you get stuff like aviation gin that I showed you and Hendrick's gin. And so last but not least, there is the classic cocktail I mentioned of the martini. Now, there's different variations of the martini. That's why I'm not going over today. But the gin craze is what sparked so much rampant popularity of the gin itself. And that's why here you get a lot of classic prohibition cocktails are from the gin craze. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my countertop again, because we're going to get into the second and the last cocktail of this session. And we're going to go ahead and replicate the bathtub gin or cocktail that they made during the bathtub gin era. This is the bee's knees. And so what we need is very, very simple. All you need is lemon juice. So we're going to go ahead and take a fresh lemon, cut that up, and squeeze in 3/4 of an ounce, so 0.75. This is a pretty juicy lemon. There we go. Make sure I get 0.75 in there. Add that in. Next, what we're gonna do is actually add, well, this is honey syrup. I'm just reusing the bottle. Ignore the label, but this is honey syrup. So all I just took was use clover honey. I did a 2-to-1 ratio, so I just added, actually 3-to-1 ratio, added 3 parts honey and 1 part of hot water, because honey is too viscous, and so if you add that into the shaker tin, it's really hard to get out of your shaker tin, out of your spoon or whatever device you're trying to add it and measure in. And so with that, you add a little bit of water just to dilute it a bit and to get it, I don't know what's the right term, but a little bit more, it's be able to flow better. It's just not as viscous. There you go. And you just add 0.75 of honey syrup in. And last but not least, we're gonna go ahead and add our gin. So now the gin of choice I'm going to be using is called Bar Hill Gin. Now this is, as you can read, it's handcrafted in the heart of Vermont. This gin is special because it is distilled with honeycomb. So pretty much they take the raw honeycomb and the honey, and then they just use that as the distillate. And they go ahead and add that into the mash and distill it. And so you get a strong taste of juniper berries, but if you mix in a cocktail, that honey flavor really shines. And so we go ahead and add 2 ounces of this straight in. All right. Bar Hill honey. So if you smell it too, you can actually smell, it's a strong scent of honey. So Bar Hill Gin, if you're interested, you can go ahead and check that out. Next, what I like to do is add salt solution. I add 2 drops into cocktails with citrus usually. Now salt solution, as Dave Arnold mentioned, it is 80 grams of salt and then 20 mils of water. Go ahead and mix that up, and it can last indefinitely in your fridge, and is super, super salty. So that's why you only need a minimal amount, like 2 drops is more than enough. But what salt does in a cocktail is just like your spice. Just like your spice. You just add a little bit and then it kicks up the flavors, also helps mask a little bit of the bitterness that comes from lemon peels. So I added my ice into my cocktail shaker. Go ahead and shake it up. All right, pop that open. All right, now of course, we're gonna go ahead and get our glass. I'm gonna be using coupe glass right here. And strain that in. For the sake of time, I am not gonna wash this. I'm just gonna put this to the side for now. And of course, last but not least, for cocktails, you always taste with your eyes, so it's good to garnish. If you do have a piece of honeycomb, that's the most appropriate garnish I can think of for this cocktail, but I do not have that because I do not own a beehive, nor am I qualified to take care of bees. So I'm gonna go ahead and just add a little garnish of lemon. Ooh, it's not sitting well, this way. There we go. And that's it, this is our bee's knees. Get the lighting there. This is our bee's knees. Alrighty, I'm gonna go ahead and switch back to my screen so that you can see me. Cool, so let's go ahead and have a taste. You're just drinking honey water. That's pretty much it. You get a little bit of juniper, but you just get nothing but honey. That's for me at least. So you can tweak a little bit. That's the awesome thing about sour cocktails, where it's 1 part of liquor, 1 part sweetener, 1 part sour. That's pretty much your family of sour cocktails. And there's so many out there, like the daiquiri is also a sour cocktail. So the bee's knees is a perfect example, because why this is actually from the Gin Crave, this cocktail, because at the time they just added a bunch of honey, a bunch of any sweeteners they could find into their gin to try to mask the impurities and the nasty stuff in the cocktail. And so that's how this cocktail was created. But of course, if you use quality ingredients now, it tastes amazing, right? Oh, thank you. So somebody commented that Bar Hill is really close to them, and recommended to try Stonecutter if I get a chance, also from Vermont. I will note that down. Thank you very much for saying that. I am very open to trying new spirits and new flavors out there. I love to collect, so thank you very much for the introduction. I appreciate it. I could drink this all day. I could drink this all day. I'm not gonna drink it now. I'm gonna save a little bit for later. But right now we do have 3 minutes left, so it's a perfect amount of time to let you guys know that holiday season's coming up. There'll be 2 more sessions, so hopefully everyone can join. Again, I'm gonna be here for if you have any questions or comments, feel free to just put them in the chat, let me know. I'm happy to answer them to the best of my ability. Again, my name is Horace, event host here at Horseations. We have 2 more sessions left. The next session is about autumn cocktails, heavy focus on apples. We're gonna be using an apple liqueur or apple brandy, you could say, Applejack, specifically Laird's. So hopefully you can join next time, and thank you very much again for joining. So I'm gonna be sticking around. Feel free to put your questions in the chat if you have any questions or comments. You're welcome. You're welcome. Hope you learned a new thing or two. Gin is amazing. Please don't get turned off too much by it. I know that juniper berry is sometimes a little off-putting. That was my first initial reaction when drinking gin. But after drinking more and more, the botanicals really get to you. You're welcome. You're welcome. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you enjoyed and learned something new. Yes, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for joining. All right. So if there's no longer any questions or comments, I'm going to go ahead and end the session. We just have maybe a few seconds left until 12:30. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. So enjoy, stay safe out there, and drink responsibly. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Hope to see you next time in the next class. Bye-bye.